So welcome to another episode of Top Healers. And today I have with me Dalia Kemble. Dalia is a diet expert helping people with eating habits. So Dalia, introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you for having me, first of all. So I'm Dalia, and I help people to find inner peace with food and their body without dieting. I'm a psychology graduate, so I combined everything that I studied for 5 years on human behavior and human habits and why we do what we do, together with my own experience of being over a decade on the binge, restrict, eating, hamster diet, where I call it. So I combine all of that together to create a really holistic approach to help people understand and change their eating habits and improve their relationship with food and their body without dieting. So we focus on things like physical health. Obviously, nutrition and fitness is really important, but as important as that is also the mindset and the body-mind connection and emotional wellness and even spiritual wellness. And all of that combined together really creates the whole approach to help people understand their habits and change their habits. Because really, when we understand our beliefs and what are going on, that really, like, our thoughts and our beliefs really do influence what we do, and that really changes and affects our reality and how we act and how we behave.
Okay.
That's in a nutshell.
That's quite a mouthful there. Okay. No, actually, I mean, though, I don't come from an eating disorder. I never had a problem with weight. I've always been between 75 and 80 kilos. Don't hate me. But somewhere when I was young, probably in fourth, fifth grade, I looked down on myself and said, I'm fat. And then I decided that I'm going to be thin forever. And every time that I would have a slight belly, I would go on running. And I would start exercising, and I've kept my body weight in this shape forever, but I know a lot of people don't. So what kind of eating disorders, what do we call them? Eating habits are you dealing with? I know there's so many. There's overweight, there's underweight. I mean, just define exactly what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I deal with a bit of both. I deal with binge eating a lot because it's something that I've personally been through, and I think it's the most thing that I can personally obviously relate to. But I also deal with the whole diet hamster wheel and the body image. I think there's a lot of problems in society with how we view our bodies and how we're supposed to look and how we should look. Like, even if you look around at different adverts and different advertisements and TV programs and whatever it is, there's like that ideal body shape that we should fit into. And if you don't, then it's like there's all this thing that's going on in our mind that we need to do a diet, like the only way to lose weight is to diet. And I'm very against that approach because I think it's way more productive and effective to actually build something that's sustainable and that's going to be, you're going to be able to continue into a whole lifestyle and a healthy lifestyle in general, because diets just don't work. They're not sustainable for the long run. They promote deprivation. So all the time you feel like you're lacking something and that you're starving yourself with it, you're restricting yourself, and you can't live like that for a whole time. So that's why I really am advocating like the whole healthy lifestyle approach and making habits that actually work for you for the long run, most importantly. And going back to your question, I kind of got on a rant there about the diet, so just repeat your question again.
Like you said, there's so many different eating habits, there's overweight and there's underweight. Do you deal with all of them, or is it just a whole philosophy that you're dealing with?
So it's a good question. I'm primarily at the moment dealing with things like binge eating, emotional eating a lot, diet, like getting off the diet wheel, losing weight without dieting, and also like obsession around food and even food addiction. There's a lot of people that have issues where they're constantly thinking about food and constantly obsessing around that. And that was something that I dealt with on the binge eating restriction wheel myself, because when you binge and restrict, so it's constantly like either binge and have zero control and always constantly eat, and it's very like all or nothing extreme approach. And then the restrict side of things is obviously that you're starving yourself and being really good and not eating, and there's a lot of behind that, there's a lot of emotional and emotions like that are kind of pushed down, I would say. So yeah, there's like, I'm trying to think how to
is there a common theme for binge eating, for instance, between people? I mean, what's the reason behind? Excuse my ignorance. I don't come from this world, so this would be fascinating for me. Why is there binge eating? Is there a satisfaction that you need to?
It's kind of a way to it's like this false illusion of self-control that like when you're on it, when you're doing it, when you're restricting, like you're really, really good and then you have control. But because the problem is because you're restricting for so long and because you starve it, like because you kind of starve yourself and really careful about what you eat and only eat really good things. So then at the end, like you end up binge eating and then you lose control. And then it's like this cycle of illusion of control, guilt, going back to that, restricting, punishing yourself and then not eating and then going back to the binge eating because you just lose control. And a lot of it really does come down to what I've discovered, it comes down to like emotions that are kind of pushed down. So one of the first things that I do with clients is something called what I call a food and mood diary. So I get them to document.
Can you repeat that?
A food and mood diary.
Food or
food and mood. Food and mood.
Food and mood. Okay.
Yeah. So I get them. First of all, I just want to emphasize that the first step to making any change ever is to become aware of the habit or what you're doing in the first place, because without awareness, we can't physically create any change because we're not conscious that we're doing something.
I have
so the food
okay, first step.
Yeah, 100%. First step is awareness. So in order to get to that place of awareness and understand more on a deeper level what's really going on, something that I do is a food and mood diary. So we do that for around a week, 10 days, sometimes 2 weeks. And I get clients to document and write down and track exactly what they're eating, when they're eating, but more importantly, not just when they're eating and what they're eating, also how they're feeling before, during, and afterwards. Okay. And then from that place, we usually after a week, we notice a lot of different patterns that are going on. So for example, someone could be eating certain foods or different things when they're bored or when they're stressed or when they're angry. And then when we understand that connection, then we can actually find different ways and more effective ways, more healthier ways to deal with the emotions behind that, rather than going for food, which kind of soothes the painful feeling at the beginning. And it, on a physiological level, it also makes sense because when we eat, and when we eat like high sugar foods, for example, then our brain releases dopamine, serotonin, and all them hormones that make us feel happy. So it kind of soothes, and it soothes painful feelings temporary. But I always say food doesn't fix emotional problems, even if it does have that kind of feeling that it gives us that happiness and that soothing of pain in the short term.
Okay. All right. So you work for, so you're saying the first step is awareness, is 100%. Mindfulness. What's the second step afterwards?
So once we have the awareness and we understand, for example, that someone is eating more when a certain thing when they're bored or when they're angry or when they're stressed, then we understand the thoughts behind that. I'm a big fan of CBT. I studied psychology for around 5 years. So I'm a big fan of CBT, and CBT is understanding the cognitions and the behavior around what you do. And one of the models that I work with is like that we have our circumstance, we have our situation, but then we have our thoughts and our beliefs, and that really does lead to how we behave in our actions, and that's what influences our reality and what our reality looks like. So it really is going back to the thoughts that we're having and the beliefs that we're having, and really kind of breaking that down. And like I always say, BS stands for belief system, but it also stands for bullshit. And so many of our beliefs really are bullshit that's just conditioned to us from society from a young age. So I really help people get out of that place and question what's going on and question different beliefs. And one of my clients literally said to me a few days ago, she said, the whole of my life I've been thinking that I'm addicted to food, and now I just realized it's just so many bullshit beliefs that I've had in my mind, and it's actually just really bad habits and really bad behaviors that I've been doing. So it really is about understanding the thoughts, understanding the beliefs that are going on in your mind, and then from that place changing them, and then from there you can really change your habits and reality.
Right. It's so true. It's so true that one sentence that was said to you when you were a kid just gets embedded in you and becomes your character, becomes your belief.
100%.
Yeah. So that's amazing. So binge eating. So basically a person starves himself throughout the day, doesn't eat anything, and then at night opens up the fridge and finishes everything in the cabinet or the cabinet. Is that how?
Well, that's what it was like for me. Like I would used to.
Actually, yeah. Tell me about yours, if you don't mind sharing your story with everybody.
Yeah, sure. I used to be so embarrassed.
How did you get to this? How did you become a diet expert?
I used to be so embarrassed to share and like talk about it, and I was like always even embarrassed to eat in front of people and things like that. And like one aspect of binge eating is that you get really kind of guilty and embarrassed about the amount that you're eating because you're like starving and because you're restricting. Then it gets like, for me, it was at night. It gets to night and then you just end up eating so much and uncontrollably that it's like a ridiculous amount. So you actually end up becoming embarrassed by that and kind of hiding that. Like I would sneak food and then hide the wrappers and so that no one could see what was going on. And then like for years it kind of becomes a thing that it's like, I always knew that it was unhealthy, but it was like this urge that was stronger than I was, and I like it just, you kind of reach for it and you just lose control. So yeah, it's definitely a self-control.
So were you overweight when you were binge eating, or?
No, and that was kind of my way to deal with that, because like a lot of the time, obviously with food addiction and things like that, there's many different ways that it can go. Like I have a client at the moment that isn't on the binge restricting, so she's not restricting, she's just more on the binge and more the addictive side of things. So then when it gets to that point, obviously you end up putting on more weight because you're just eating and eating and eating. But a lot of the time with the binge restricting, you're actually starving or restricting or going on the next fad diet or being really, really good. So then you're not consuming a lot of calories, but then you kind of balance that out by with the binges. So I'd never really put on too much weight. Like I put on a couple of kilos here and there, and then whenever I'd put on, I just go back onto restrict mode and then just kind of starvation mode, lose the weight and be really hungry and then eat again. And it was just like this downward spiral of.
So what happened? How did you change things? When did you realize that you actually had an issue or a problem?
So I finished studying in 2018. I studied a degree in psychology and then a degree in a master's in organizational behavior and development, which is all about human behavior and habits within organizations. So I've been working like with human behavior and emotions over 5-7 years or like something like that. And then after that, I got to the point where I was working in a corporate company and I was super burnt out. I was working and studying, doing so many things at the same time. And then I ended up taking a break, quitting everything and actually going on a solo travel trip to India. And it was there that everything changed, because I had this, what I call spiritual awakening, where I actually connected to who I really was without all the bullshit beliefs of I should be doing this and I should be doing that. And for the first time, I realized, and this is something that I want all the listeners to take from this, to remember that we are human beings and not human doings. And it's really important. As much as it's important to do and take action, it's also important to be and to connect to ourselves and to connect to who we really are. And it was only from that place where I had the time to really do that I kind of discovered all these things and connected to who I was and understood different emotions and let myself really feel things. Because I had a tendency before that if I was experiencing different emotions, or I'd say difficult emotions and negative emotions that are uncomfortable and you don't really want to deal with, my way of dealing with that was either eating to stuff it down or staying really busy and like going into work mode and just being busy to not deal with the emotions. And then all of a sudden, for the first time, I was in a place where I could sit and just be, and I got into the world of meditation and journaling and just things like that. And then the emotions really came up, and only from letting them come up and really dealing with them could I then deal with the eating habits and understand the emotions that were connected to that. And then it really brought me into the holistic approach, because everything is so connected, like unbelievably connected. Like even, it was only yesterday I was talking to a client and she was telling me about her financial situation and her business situation. And she was like, it's got nothing to do with food. And I said, it has everything to do with food, because if you're stressed about your business and that's affecting your finances, then it's going to affect your mental and your physical health. And that's also going to affect your eating habits. So everything is so, so connected. And that's why like I'm super, super passionate about the whole holistic approach and going really deep into emotional health and emotional wellness and letting ourselves more than anything feel emotions, because so often we're taught, again, we're conditioned from a young age to not feel emotions and to disconnect from painful emotions, and even like the beliefs around like that real men don't cry or that women shouldn't be angry and all these things that come up. So it's really, really important to understand that we are human beings, we have all these range of emotions, and to really let ourselves lean into that discomfort and to feel that, and only from that place then we can change everything else that's going on around us.
Right. So besides recommending to everybody to take a backpack and go to India for a year, I mean, during our busy lives, how can we find that space of reflection, of looking inside and finding that peace that you had in India, the realization that we're connected in some mindset and.
So there's a few things, and the good news is you don't need to get a backpack and buy a one-way ticket and go to India. There's other things that you can do right here, right now that take even 2 to 3 minutes a day. First of all, I would definitely recommend one of the first things to wake up, to meditate, and you can literally do 5 minutes a day and it will make such a difference. And if if you've never meditated before, you can literally just type in YouTube 5-minute guided meditation, and they will tell you exactly what to do. And all you need to do is put headphones in, give yourself 5 minutes and listen, and it will just start the day so differently. Another thing that I love doing is listening to affirmations, because they're super powerful to really kind of change our limiting beliefs and really reprogram our mind. And again, on YouTube, there's loads of affirmations. Someone that I really recommend is Bob Baker. I love his affirmations, and he has different topics. He has for weight loss, for gratitude, for like all these different things. So you can literally just type in affirmations for whatever it is you're looking for. And that's just a really good way. And even just listening to podcasts like this, I think it's amazing that you're doing podcasts like this, and even just finding things, really being intentional and conscious about what you're consuming. And even if you're walking to work or whatever it is and listening to a podcast at the same time, just things like that can really help you to find that peace and find that connection. The other thing is, there's two other things that are really important. One, to consciously, intentionally make time for self-care. And it could be that half an hour a week, you go out with a friend, or you go for a walk, or you go in nature, or you go to the beach, or go for a run, or whatever it is. Movement is really important. So I would definitely say, like, even if you don't love exercising or doing running or doing workout classes, even just go for a walk and be outside in nature. It makes a huge difference to your mental and physical and spiritual and everything else. And the next thing I do that is really helpful is to take literally 5 minutes at the end of every week and reflect on the week that just passed, and what went well, what worked, what didn't. And it's really important to write that down. Something that I do with clients, I also do with myself, is to have a list of accomplishments and on a weekly basis update that. Because it's so, otherwise we just get to the point where we're so focused on moving forward and getting to the next place, and we don't realize and notice the progress that we've actually made. So it's really important to celebrate the wins and to notice how far we've come on the way. And all of that will really help you to kind of connect more to yourself and notice as well, like how far you're really coming, rather over focusing on how far you actually have left to go.
Wow, you've got way beyond diet here. You've got your whole productivity and awareness, and meditation is amazing. I meditate. You take those 5-minute breaks in the afternoon just to energize yourself. And you're right, going outside and going in nature and going to the beach is something that is so helpful and energizing, which is why I started doing Tuesday evening sunset qigong on the beach in Herzliya for free for anybody who wants to join. And just check that. So
amazing.
No, it's really important, and reflections on the week, seeing where you are and how you're progressing and moving forward. That's really important. So amazing. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. You mentioned that affirmations. Bob who?
Bob Baker.
Bob Baker.
Okay.
Actually, I listen to other affirmations during my one of my practices, the Qigong, that take 12 minutes. So I have that. I've been doing it daily for the past 5 years, and it's just great. Actually, it's brought me to this place, so it works.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's great. What did I want to ask you? So in India, did you have a one moment kind of that brought you that realization that you had kind of an awareness, or was it a step-by-step kind of daily routine that you had, all of a sudden you realized I need to change
it's a good question. I think it was more of a process than a realization. There was a point where I was kind of overwhelmed at because it's so extreme to go from I literally, before I left India, I was working 12, 14 hours a day, doing crazy things, always busy. And then I got to the place where I was just free to do what I wanted to do and just to sit and do whatever I wanted to do. And it's kind of extreme. And it really relates back to the whole eating disorder side of things as well. I was really extreme with eating. It was either all or nothing. It was be really good and really careful, or just go complete extreme and go the complete opposite. And the same kind of thing happened to me with the whole holistic approach and the whole connection, that I went really, really extreme at the beginning. So literally overnight, I decided to stop drinking alcohol, stop drinking caffeine, stop smoking cigarettes, turn vegan from eating meat to completely turn vegan, and do intermittent fasting and all of these things. And it was very, very extreme. And it was only over time, I would say it took me around a year and a half to really find that balance, and to find balance with eating again, and to find balance between everything in moderation, and that it's okay to have some things and you don't need to go all extreme, and it doesn't have to be like completely black or white, and there is some gray in between, and that's also okay. And I think a lot of finding that balance really involves a lot of practicing self-compassion as well, and not kind of blaming ourselves and not feeling too guilty about having those things, and like that it's also okay. Yeah, I think that was amazing. There was something else.
I think it's all about balance, and I think probably being in India is really easy to take you away from the fridge and take you away from the house and your normal routine, and breaking that habit cycle is really important. Which is why, when people go on vacation, for instance, they're still taking their habits with them. They take their phone, instead of putting their phone on the side and just disconnecting from everything and just being alone with their mind and their family for like a few days, because it takes a few days just to wind down your brain to stop working so fast like it does in our normal lives. So when we take a break, putting the phone away and just disconnecting and just noticing nature, noticing things around you, can just stop and break all habits and begin the realization that of who you are and what you are and what's around you. I think that's really important.
100%.
Yeah.
It's so important. There's just something about the habits as well. Like, I just want to emphasize that changing habits doesn't need to be a huge thing, because our subconscious mind is like really tries to keep us safe and in that safe zone, and it doesn't like when we make big changes. So I think it's really, really important to implement really small changes and small steps, and just to even take one step to get you closer to where you want to be. For example, if you're like drinking loads of fizzy drinks and sugary drinks and things like that, then I'm not saying that you have to go straight in and be like, now never drink fizzy drinks again and never do this. Obviously, it's the ideal situation to only drink water, but you can do it over time. And like, something that helps with a couple of my clients is to make sure is to implement some new habits. So for example, when they first wake up in the morning, drink that glass of water, and then like before they go to sleep or whatever it is, and then even just drinking like them extra 2 or 3 cups a day, it's still more than you were drinking before, and it's still like getting you into that mindset of slowly, and then it becomes a thing. Like, when you wake up, you drink water, and it does take time to build habits, but it's important to like make them really small incremental steps, but instead of like going all big, because sometimes we set these huge big goals and it seems so far away from where we are. So then we just go into that mindset of, oh my God, I don't know how to get there, and it seems so far, so I'm just not going to do anything and I'm going to give up.
Right. 3 years ago, I tried the 80-10-10 method. Graham, I believe, was it? And I did it all at once. So I cut everything and just went raw. Fruits and vegetables, seeds, nuts, and sprouted lentils. And the difference was amazing. I was energized all of a sudden and focused, and I didn't have that afternoon lag needing to take a siesta. I was just energized throughout the day. So I think sometimes maybe when you do that extreme shift and make a change, you can really test to see if something is working or not within a short time. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. I think something really important about doing that, I think maybe your mindset was in the right place, because if you're in a mindset that you are cutting everything out and that you're depriving yourself, then you're going to feel that you're lacking something. But if you go into the mindset, like something that I'm really passionate about doing is changing the focus on how you look at things, because when you focus on something, that's really like how your perception of things look. So if you're focusing on the fact that you have to cut everything out and you're depriving yourself and you're lacking, then it's not potentially going to work for the long run, because you always feel that sense of that you're missing out on something. But if, for example, you change that deprivation around and you're like, what am I actually depriving by eating it? And that could be that you're depriving yourself of energy and feeling good and feeling healthy, and you focus on that side of things, then that's going to keep you going. So it could be that your mindset was already in that place of, now I feel really good and now I feel energized and I don't feel like I'm lacking something, and that's why it works. But if someone already goes into something with the mindset of it's not going to work, or I've tried this before, or I'm going to be missing out on something, then it's not going to work. So I think I totally relate to what you're saying as well, but I think it's also important to build the right mindset and go in it with the intention that this is going to make me feel better, or I'm doing this for a certain reason. And the power of why you're doing something is one of the most important things. Like, you really need to know why you're doing what you're doing, and it will help you to stay committed. Like, even when motivation goes down, or even when willpower is kind of lacking or down a bit, knowing why you're doing something and committing to it and why it's really important for you, that's what's going to keep you going and going to keep something working for the long run.
Yeah, definitely. I think your focus and your drive and your intentions definitely take you to one way or another. It's interesting. After I started going raw and going vegan and raw, basically, I had ice cream like 3 weeks afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And the energy level and the stomach ache that I had just from one ice cream had me realize how my body reacted to dairy that I normally had before. So that's something I no longer eat. I would rather have a milk. Amazing. Okay. Um, can you give us an example? Tell me about your first patient experience. The first person ever. All the healers remember the first person they healed.
Yeah, I definitely did, because it was a lovely lady who was suffering with binge eating for over 20 years. And I remember it clearly because by the time we finished work, I'll tell you a bit about what happened in a minute, but by the time we finished working together, she stopped binge eating for the first time after 20 years, after trying all of these things. Wow. So it was like really, really wow and amazing. And not only that, something that we don't focus on a lot is that when we're obsessed with food, or when we're constantly thinking around food, we take up a lot of mental space. So when we improve our relationship with food, we actually free a lot of that mental space and have a lot of mental clarity. So something else that she achieved that was really big for me and for her, apart from the food side of things and improving the relationship with food, was that she's a self-employed hairdresser. And for the first time in like 5 years, she actually increased her prices. And it was something that she didn't have the confidence to do before, because she didn't know if she was good enough or if people would pay her for all these things. So it just really is an example of how changing your relationship with food, which you think has nothing connected at all to what you're doing into your business, really can have an effect on not only your business and your finances, but also on your confidence and your self-worth and how you think about yourself, and feel it going from that place that you feel that you are good enough, and that all these different things. So that was like, I guess, the big results that came from the first thing. And it gave me that drive to, this is working. And like everything, I felt like I really went through what I did. And I'm like super grateful that I went through everything I did, because now I can combine everything together and I know what works and what doesn't, like from my own experience as well, because I tried all these different things for years and years, and like new diets and this and this and this and that. And it was always like, I think there's this big perception in the diet industry that if you want to lose weight or if you want to do this, you have to go on another diet. And a lot of the time they like promote diets as healthy eating, and there's like the fitness diet and this and that and all of these things, but a lot of the time it's just not sustainable, and it sets us up for failure, because it gives us that feeling of that we're depriving ourselves and that we're restricting ourselves and that we're missing out on something. So I think only after going through all of that and understanding that all of that thing doesn't work, and that we really need to connect to the emotional side of things and our habits and our thought patterns and our beliefs and all of that sort of stuff. And I think only then, like by combining that together with everything I went through and back to everything I studied in psychology and using that, all the tools that I learned there as well, I think I created like this space of, and sometimes I like take a step back and I look at it and I'm like, this is exactly what I needed back then. Like if I would have had this back then I wouldn't have probably gone through 10 years or 5 years of going through what I did, but I'm kind of grateful that I did right now, because then I can just help other people with them tools as well.
Amazing. So what is your system called? Did you give it a name?
I'm still thinking of a name. And I'm actually in the process of launching a group program as well. So I'm still thinking of the name, so stay tuned.
It will come to you, don't worry. Can you tell me a little bit of the other? I have a friend who's on this diet program where he only eats fat, which doesn't make sense to me. No fruits, no vegetables, mostly fat. Do you know that diet that eats fat mostly?
I know there's the keto diet.
Okay, tell me about the keto diet, because it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't agree with the approach of just eating fats. I know there's people that do it and they do lose weight by doing it.
Right.
But I personally don't think it's healthy to completely restrict. I think eating fruit and vegetable, like mostly fruit and vegetables in your diet, is one of the most important things you can eat, and eating things that are grow, like just from the conscious side of things, eating things that are grown in nature and grown with sunlight and without too many preservatives and all of these things are just important. That's what our body really needs.
Right.
And I think depriving ourselves of that is not healthy at all. I think, again, we need to understand that we live in a world with a multi-billion diet industry, and there's a lot of advertisements and a lot of promotions. And if people are seeing these things and seeing, yeah, you can lose this amount of weight, or you can get results by doing that, then people don't necessarily question what goes in behind that. And a lot of the time I say as well that like the food industry kind of creates the food and gives it to us, and the health industry obviously treats us, but there's not enough connection between the health and the food.
No.
And we can really use food as a way to heal ourselves and a lot of illnesses and a lot of diseases, and the food industry doesn't promote that because the diet industry is like multi-billion dollars. And
right.
I don't think it's a coincidence that the diet industry is the amount that it is, and that there's over an 80% failure rate, and it really is like a whole money thing, and no one really cares about the health side behind it. But then people are so susceptible to believe in what they see and to believe in advertisements and to being kind of dragged into all these things, and then it just turns into this whole societal norm, I would say.
You know, a diet will work once you're aware of what you're eating, because if you start a diet, then you're following this diet and you're following strict behavior and knowing exactly what you put in. So you're going to lose weight because you're not binge eating or you're not out of control. So you're in control. But is your body really getting all the nutrients that it needs if it's not having fruits and vegetables? So it really didn't make sense to me that having a fat diet, I mean, you might lose weight, but then you might be paying it in other ways. Yeah. Okay.
I think there's a lot of myths around sugar, and I speak about it a lot as well. I think obviously processed sugar isn't good for you, but then people have this perception that fruit is also a lot of sugar and you shouldn't eat too much fruit and it's not good for you. But there's a huge difference between natural sugar and between processed sugar. And it's a whole myth that's been created that fruit isn't good for you either. Exactly. And fruit is like natural sugar that your body actually needs. Like if you just eat fruit and don't eat processed sugar, you will be healthy and you will be fine.
Which is what I eat. Yeah, okay. Very nice. No, the reason I asked you if you had a process in India or a sudden affirmation all of a sudden was because my last episode was Nomi, and she went on Mount Sinai, and then she had all of a sudden a realization. So it was a sudden one moment realization of what she needs to do and what she does, kind of an awakening. Okay.
Yeah, 100% awakening. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
So are you working only with Israeli clients, or is it global right now? Are you frontal, online? How do you work with people?
Very global. So it's all virtual.
Okay.
I have people in Israel, Australia, France, Switzerland, London. Yeah, literally all over US. So yeah, and I think that's the thing that I love, that you can't, we live in a virtual world. Obviously there's disadvantages and advantages of social media and the virtual world, but something that I love is the ability to just connect to people everywhere and just expand your reach and be able to help people in so many places without physically having to be there. Just going back to the diet side for 1 second, because there was something that I just wanted to add to that. Something that I always tell people, if you are planning on starting a new diet or doing some new food thing or whatever, just ask yourself, is it sustainable for you for the long term? Because if it's not, and you don't see yourself doing it in a year or 2 years from now, then probably don't waste your time, money and energy starting now, because it's going to put you into, it's going to not make you very happy to waste all the time, money and energy you're going to put into it. And then in 6 months, you're like, yeah, I can't see myself doing this for the rest of my life and it's not going to work. And that's why I think it's really important to create more of a lifestyle change rather than going on a quick bad diet that's potentially not going to be sustainable for you in the long run.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. Great. Well, Dalia, thanks for sharing. How can people reach you? Where can they find you?
So I have my Facebook group. You're welcome to join. I share a lot of free resources in there. It's free to join, of course. It's called the Self-Love Diet. It's called the Self-Love Diet, Healthy Lifestyle and Body Confidence Community. I can send it over to you if you would like.
Yeah, send it over and I'll post it right here and put it beneath so people can have an access to reach you. And we'll also leave your phone number here so people can reach you.
Amazing.
Great. Well, Dalia, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge, and you're doing great work helping people. And
thank you. And thank you for this podcast. It's great. I think it's amazing that you have this opportunity for people to hear all of these different opportunities and all of these different things. And it's really helpful too.
My pleasure. I think we're building a community of healers here, and it's fantastic. I'm already sending people to this healer and this healer just because I can't offer, I can't offer all the treatments for everybody. I deal with back pain mostly, but if it's on an emotional level, I can't deal with it. I can deal on the physical, bringing people back into balance and getting them out of pain and into a living, being in shape and living an optimal life, but not on the emotional level. So it's great that everyone else is here to help assist as well. What did I want to say? Oh, and people, subscribe. If you're on YouTube and watching this, please subscribe, because we know a lot of people watch and don't subscribe. If you subscribe and just hit the bell, you'll be noticed on the next episode. And you can find us on Spotify and Google Podcasts and others. So we'll see you on the next episode of Top Healers. Bye, Dalia. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.